Garden here in Ensell in the West Midlands, and it's great to be with you. I'm John from Fruit Midlands Limited, a social enterprise that does training from cradle to grave in the West Midlands as well, and I'm going to talk to you today about baking a cake. And one of my most favourite types of cakes that I like to bake has all sorts of interesting ingredients in. First of all, one of the ingredients I like to put in my cake is lots of potato peelings and vegetable peelings in there. I also like to put green grass, weeds, leaves and things like that in. Also in my cake, I like to put ripped up cardboard, and I also like to put brown leaves in and ripped up paper as well. Oh, and just to add a bit more to it, in my cakes I like to put manure as well. It tastes great in a cake, and also a bit of soil. And the cake that I'm making isn't for me, it's for the gardeners, one of the gardeners' really good friends, the humble earthworm. So the cake that we're building, they're going to mix and they're going to bake for us, and they do it all the time, and wherever you're standing on a piece of ground, the worms are working away to create something that is really special, and if we didn't have, we'd be living in a desert, and as a human race, in fact, most things on the planet would die out without the help of the earthworm. So the earthworm, generally speaking, is around, there's about 2,700 species, there's 3,000 species of earthworm. The longest earthworm that they ever found, or the longest worm they ever found, was 7 meters long. They can have as many as 5 pairs of hearts, and the earthworms beneath the farmer's soil could be greater than that of the livestock that is on the surface. In fact, a kilogram of earthworms is more precious and more expensive than a kilogram of beef, and actually contains more protein. And within 1 acre of soil in England, there's approximately 1 million earthworms. And so what we're talking about here is soil. And soil's a really important thing, and earthworms are a big part of that. And that within that cake, within this thing that we're baking here, this soil that we're making, the top layer of soil, obviously, is that lovely dark, rich, black topsoil that we see and we take for granted. That's got organic matter in, and it's got something that binds minerals together and that feeds plants, and then eventually feeds us and holds on to the moisture. That layer there, naturally, takes up to 200 years to create. It takes 200 years to naturally create that much topsoil. That's really important. So that layer there, there's about 400 years worth there. And so what we can find out today is how we can speed up that process and work with the things that we have in the garden to benefit us as humans and to benefit the wildlife that's around. So what I want to talk to you about is what might you want to put into creating something called compost. And compost is what we can add to the soil to enrich it and to speed up that process from going down from 200 years to 1 year. And when you look at compost, there's 2 ways of looking at it. You'll notice that we have 2 different ingredients here. The one ingredient here is quite wet, moist stuff. It comes from vegetable peelings. A lot of it's green, so green grass, green leaves. There's a high moisture content. That is considered to be nitrogen. The other one that I've got here is brown leaves, brown cardboard, paper. You might have wood chip or small pieces of wood. That would be considered to be carbon. Also straw as well. So grass that's dried out, that isn't as dry, would also be going to carbon. So if I have a handful of green nitrogen type stuff, I need a handful of brown carbon. And that is a 50-50 ratio. It's as simple as that. If you can get that ratio right within your compost heap, 50-50, it will break down quickly and turn into excellent compost. You won't get a smell, and it will be really rich in nutrients. Because there's 2 things that people always say to me about compost heaps is, oh, it's really smelly, or it's just not doing anything. I look in there, it's the same thing. So the issue, most of the issues are that there isn't enough of the green or there isn't enough of the brown, or there's too much of the brown, there's not too much of the green. It's getting a balance, and that's what's a really important part of doing that. And of course, the other important ingredients, we're breathing it in at the moment, is air, and another one which is water. Yeah, so getting the water content is like too much, and what happens is the water gets trapped in there and it starts to make the compost heap smelly. Too little, it just won't do anything. Now, to speed up that process even more, you can introduce worms, and you can actually create an amazing type of compost. I mean, the Japanese have developed this further and further in their country, their culture, and it's really picking up here. And you can start up what's called a wormery. And I've got one here that you can buy as a kit. It has about 3 layers, and this one we can start off. And what it is about with a wormery, it's about literally what I've just been saying about, which is that carbon to nitrogen ratio. Now you've got to remember with worms is that they like things in small pieces. Yeah. So if I just chuck that big piece of cardboard in there like that, they won't like that. They don't like that. They like it nice and small pieces. So small pieces of cardboard. Yeah. They go into there, and also your leaves as well. So again, if you can break them up a little bit, like so, you can put leaves in there, and again, newspaper. If you can break the newspaper up, tear it up, crunch it up, and again, what you're doing when you break something into a smaller piece, you're creating more surface area, and that helps it to be broken down, and it helps the bacteria to break it down quicker than if you just chuck a block of whole newspaper and all the yellow pages in there or something like that. And also, screw it up a little bit as you put it in there, adds air, it creates air gaps that are in there, which is really good. And the other things that you can place within there is your nitrogen, which is green grass, leaves, green leaves, not dry brown leaves, but green leaves. And of course, your vegetable peelings, they can go in there. And also, you're going to need to start it off with some worms. Now, I have been over to my compost heap. I've got a manure heap. Now, if I ever want to find some earthworms or different types of worms that we want to put in there, you can buy them. You can go to a fishing shop where they sell fishing tackle, or you can just go and find them. The one place that I always look at is in the manure heap, and I can see I've got a nice one there, so he's ready to go in. And you just start to look through, and then you start to see them. Oh, look at that! There's quite a few in that lump there. So instead of pulling them out, I'm going to put them in there as the manure. So we're starting to get it all started off. And so the other thing that we needed to have was a bit of soil in there to get it started, and worms to be covered over and in the dark. It's important that they're in the dark. They don't like the light. And again, where you put the situation of a wormery is they don't like direct sunlight, they don't like freezing temperatures. The soil, when you start to dig down in it, is very stable as far as temperatures go. Generally, once you dig down, it gets to about 10 degrees, and that's where it stays, whether that's in the summer or in the winter. And that's what earthworms like, that nice, stable temperature. So, also, keep it, you want to be in control of the moisture that goes in there. So, keep it out of the rain, so try and put it in a cool, dry place, out of direct sunlight, and doesn't go below 4 degrees centigrade, doesn't go above 20 degrees, 23 degrees centigrade. It's all possible. Remember, it's off the ground, it's volatile, temperatures can get in there and change it for the worms. So other things that you can put in there, things like flour, bread, with the normal compost heap, there's a few rules that you wouldn't put cooked food or anything like that in, but what you wouldn't put in there is you wouldn't put meat, and avoid acidic or citrus things like orange peel and things like that. So those are the types of things that therefore go in your wormery. And you just keep filling it up each day. Keep filling it up and filling it up and filling it up and filling it up. And once it's full, the great thing about it is you have another layer that you can put on, and you can start filling up that layer. Sit inside, put the lid up, and you start the process again. The great thing about it is that over time, the worms break down the compost, and they give you this lovely amazing crumbly textured compost that's there. It's absolutely fantastic stuff, packed with the essential nutrients that plants need to grow. And also, the other thing that filters through through this tray here is it's got a tap on the front. There's a kind of juice that comes out the bottom. Now that's not for you to drink. I wouldn't recommend drinking that at all. But actually, your plants really love it if you put it in the bottom of your watering can, and like you're making some Ribena or some cordial. Yeah, fill it up with water. Water your plants with it in the growing season when the temperature's quite high for the spring and summer, and the plants love the nutrition that comes out of it, and you can increase the yields on your crops. You can get bigger, better cabbages and lettuces, and all of the plants will thrive on that little feed. And then with the compost, you can either grow more plants in it or spread it out over your garden, and you keep putting back into the soil. You keep balancing out. Because remember, what you take out of the soil, if you cut something back, if you take out some vegetables out of it, you've got a balance issue that you need to address. You've taken something away, so you have to replace it. And setting up a composter is a really good way of doing it. Now, if you want to sort of really look at worms, and worms are fascinating creatures to look at, you can start a worm farm that you can do inside with some very simple things. So we've got lots of recycled stuff that's around us. Now, you might be saying, hold on a second, John, I want to start a worm farm. Do I have to go out and buy them? I say, well, no, you haven't got to go out and buy worms. You can get worms from your garden. One of the easiest ways to do that actually is a cardboard box. If you take a cardboard box and basically just sort of flatten it out, so you can see here we take this cardboard box and you get it nice and flat like that. If you go over to an area of soil in your garden, a patch of soil that nobody really goes too much, maybe in the shade a little bit, so it's not too hot, take it, get the cardboard, if it's not raining or whatever like that, get the cardboard nice and wet, put it on the bare ground, get it nice and wet, put some stones on it, leave it, come back a couple of weeks later, the worms will work their way to the surface and you'll be able to pick them out. And that's how you can start to get the worms for your wormery. Obviously you've got to be super careful. There's a bit of a myth that people think that you can cut a worm in half and you'll have like two. That doesn't really work. They eventually die. I don't think you'd like to be cut in half. So be really gentle with worms. And again, worms are our best friends because worms make this soil that takes years and years and years and years to be produced. So remember, that's top centimetre and up to 200 years. Soil. So it's important that worms are allowed to do that work, to do that job. And when you create your wormery, what you're also doing is you're creating topsoil. You're seeing how soil works. Now, my son had a worm world for Christmas. And you'll notice it's there, it's nice and dark. He had to go at making the different layers. So he used some sand to do it. You can see it's in this glass case, well, plastic case that's here, and you can see the worms are working their way through the different stratas. They're working their way up, and they've been going around inside there, and they've even been pulling leaves down. And you'll see that worms do that. They'll pull leaves down, they'll pull stuff from the surface down to the bottom, and they're actually turning the soil over forward. They're actually doing what we do, like a gardener would do with a fork. They're turning that organic matter in. So organic matter isn't something that's chemical free. Organic, when we say the word organic, it's something that was once living and rots down. So that's what we talk about organic. It doesn't mean it's chemical free, because we can go out and buy organic food. Organic actually means something that once was living and rots down, and basically it turns into this humus that we have within the soil that makes it black. It's like a black jelly. If you look at it under a microscope, it'll be like a black jelly that binds lots of different minerals and sands and things like that together. So I don't think you don't have to go out and buy one of these. Like my son got given one of these for Christmas. you don't need to go and do that. All you need to make your own is one of these, which you can get out of your recycling bin. So a lot of the stuff we've got here, we've got out of our recycling bin. And what you need to do is get permission from your parents or guardian or someone that's supervising you to use a pair of scissors basically to cut the top off the bottle. We're going to create the layers of the wormery inside of this bottle. So I'm going to cut the lid off. So. Do it very carefully, watch out for any sharp bits that might be on there on the top. So we've got it cut out there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it like a little bit like soil is naturally. So right at the bottom, if you keep digging down, you'll hit stones and you'll hit sort of bits of sand, and it's not like soil at all. But you've got to remember that soil is made out of sand. It's made out of stones that have ground up. Yeah. And so what we start to see is we're going to create like a substrata effect. So you can see there a real clear way. That's the real bottom. If you dug into the soil, that horizon would be there at the bottom. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to start to introduce soil slowly to it. So we'll put one handful in, like so. And you can start to see that actually it starts to get darker. So I'll put less sand in there, more soil. So it's starting to get darker, which is when you start to dig down, that's how you'll see it will go. So you can see already it's going from light to darker and darker to the point whereby it's getting darker. Darker as we're getting closer and closer to the surface. So we've got no more sand and we're going for this topsoil. And so what we then want to do is on the surface is we're going to start to introduce our worms. So I'm going to take some of this manure, start to mix it in. I'm going to take some of these vegetable peelings and put those in. I'm going to take some green grass and put that on the surface because that's our organic matter. I'm going to take some more animal feces, poo, put that on the surface. Dried leaves going into there. And so within the manure, I've got some worms there I can add to it. We've got what it's like, what topsoil looks like, what soil looks like. So you've not only made a wormery, but you can see what your soil looks like when you dig it out the ground. And that's an important lesson. It goes from sand, and as it goes to the surface, we get closer to the oxygen as we go to where the worms are working away, and they're dragging the leaves down, and then pulling them up, pulling them down, breaking them up, turning the soil around. On the surface, what the worms are creating is a black, dark soil with that humus in, feeding the plants and making this wonderful soil that stops us from being a desert, and actually that we're a really, really productive soil that we can produce all sorts of different crops in that will keep us fed and also create gardens that other wildlife can be sustained within, and everybody benefits from what worms do. So the last thing that I've got to make sure that we do is we put a bit of water in there. Well, I say last thing, the last few things that we have to do. We'll put a bit of water in there to keep it to make sure that basically the worms don't dry out in there. We're going to put the lid back on, so I'm going to cut a few slants in that way because we'll be able to put the lid inside there, and it should be able to sit just inside there like that. There we go. And of course, the most important thing now that you have to do, ideally if you've got a black sheet of paper or black tape, is therefore to wrap up your wormery, tape it shut, still let the air in, and what you've got to think about doing then is not keeping it in direct sunlight. So if you've got somewhere under the stairs that you can put it, tape it up closed, get some sellotape out. If you've got somewhere where you can place it, where it's cool and dry, so don't put it by the radiator or put it on the windowsill in direct sunlight, you'll be able to see the worms moving around, pulling down the organic matter that was there and turning the soil over. Now, you don't have to do all of the different layers like I've done to make it look like the substrata of soil. Like my son, he had like different coloured sands, so he just put like a red layer in and a yellow layer in, and basically what you can see is, you can see these paths that have gone through where the worm's gone up and down and around, and basically you can see how the worms have worked around, and they've been doing the work of a farmer, like with his plough, or what a gardener would do with the fork. They've been turning that soil over and incorporating that organic matter in. And that's what the most important thing about what you're creating with soil, with the correct amount of organic matter, adding compost to it, adding that liquid with water. What you're doing is you're feeding the microorganisms that are there within the soil. Now, in this soil that I've got here, this topsoil, it's wrong for me to say that in a handful of really good compost or topsoil like this, that there are more living organisms than there are people on planet Earth. I would be wrong to say that, because there's more than that. It's actually a teaspoon. If I just had a teaspoon of it, there would be more living organisms. That includes bacteria, fungal organisms, even all the little creepy crawlers that go in there, including earthworms and beetles and millipedes and things like that. There's more of those in a teaspoon than there are people on planet Earth. So you imagine going to a really packed Birmingham city centre when it's really, really packed out, and see how many people are there, or you see a big sports event, or a big concert. That doesn't even account for how many microorganisms working away in the soil with the earthworms to produce an amazing topsoil, just in one teaspoon of really good soil. And so it's really important that you help the worms within your garden. Don't over dig, don't dig too much. Dig a little bit, yes, but incorporate manure, incorporate compost. Keep the soil moist. And that way you can work with the worms, you can work with nature to produce a really productive garden. Now, amazing facts we've learned. 2,700 different species of worms. That some worms have 5 pairs of hearts within them. That there are approximately 1 million worms working silently beneath our feet in 1 acre of soil. And that the weight of worms very often is higher than the weight of livestock, that's cows, sheep, goats, that a farmer might have on the surface. There's a higher weight of worms that's in the soil beneath their feet. And also, the other thing that you've got to look out for is something called a worm cast. You'll start to see these. This is where you see like a strange sort of shape that appears on the surface of the soil. A worm cast is not regurgitated food, so the worm hasn't been sick. What you actually find out with the worm cast is the worm's gone through the soil. If you look inside, if you had like an X-ray and you looked inside a worm, it's got soil that runs through it. It's got organic matter that's running through it. And when it gets to the surface, it excretes it. So actually, it's kind of like worm poo that's on the surface. But that's great. That's showing that the soil is lovely and healthy. And if you want to start a wormery, remember these things. A handful of green, wet, moist nitrogen, and a handful of carbon, cardboard, paper, straw. Get that balance right, you'll have amazing compost. Put it in your wormery, put it in with manure, put it in with soil, put it in with paper, put it in with your vegetable peelings, put it in with a bit of moisture, a bit of water, but most importantly, put it in a cool, dry place. Cool in the summer, doesn't go below 4 degrees, doesn't go to freezing in the winter, and you're in control of the moisture. So you're pouring the water in there because you don't want worms don't want to swim in water. They want to have just the right amount of water content. That's really important. And again, if you do that with your wormery, make sure it's nice and closed up. Make sure you put a bit of sand in there. Make sure you put some soil in. Make sure you put some leaves in. Make sure you put a bit of paper in there. Make sure you put a bit of manure in there. And also, if you want to catch some worms, just a piece of cardboard on the surface of the soil. Water it, put a bit of rock on there to stop the carbon from blowing away. Make sure it stays moist. Then a couple of weeks later, see what you've discovered. See whether you've managed to get some worms. And remember, a kilogram of worms is worth more than a kilogram of beef. And if you're really struggling to find some worms, go to your fish and tackle shop and you can buy some from there. So I hope you've really enjoyed this sort of special video that we've done live about worms. I'm hoping that you're enjoying what we've said about the amazing facts and the amazing relationship that we have with worms and how important that they are. That if we haven't got them, we would be in a desert and all other life forms wouldn't be here. In fact, they're even saying that they're learning so much about worms now that they think that earthworms have the ability to help us with climate control. That they are part of the solution. That our climate is changing because of the carbon cycle and because of something called the greenhouse effect. That actually earthworms are part of the solution or a key element of solving that problem. So when you see an earthworm in the garden, it's your best friend. Whether you're a gardener or whether you want to carry on living on this planet or whether you want to see more life being sustained on this planet, your earthworm is your best friend. So thank you very much for watching and have a go at getting a bottle and making yourself topsoil and a wormery. Enjoy yourselves.